And what I want to know is what you've seen around the country when it comes to entrepreneurs around what do they need for urban planning, what works, what doesn't work.
I think that it's quite obvious in Australia, particularly Queensland, that small business is really what has been the staple of all of our cities and the success and the ease of livelihood that we've had. I had a recent trip to San Francisco, and this is the best way that I can put it. They've got 10 times the population, so the investment comes 10 times earlier, 10 times more. They don't have really good social, social infrastructure, they don't get health benefits, etc. So they also get paid $5 for working in their version of Woolies, whereas we get 30. So it's way more attractive to get into entrepreneurship. So the groups in the middle, like 500 Startups and Y Combinator, don't actually have to do that much. As a polar opposite here in Brisbane, and Queensland in particular, we have hardly any money coming in through VC and Angel. We have hardly anyone joining, let's call it startups, because it's way easier to be at uni, get pocket money for your mum, work at Woolies for $35 an hour, and then chase girls or guys or whatever suits you. So the people in the middle, like us, have to work really, really hard to help people actually grow innovative and, let's say, scaling companies. If you put their top 10 from YCOM or batch 21 from 500 startups against our top 10 that are early stage, we would get annihilated because they have more money, they have more resources, and there's more competition. If you put our top 10 growth stage companies versus their top 10 growth stage, we would destroy them. The reason is the people here that got to a highly scalable, growing company had to work so much harder to get there with so much less resources and so much less population to conquer.
So, when we did the live polling this morning, this group, the number one thing they said we needed more of was to attract investment into the CBD. What can we do? What have you seen around the world? And I pose that to all of you.
I'll just say something really quickly. A lot of you probably know Springfield. Just in Ipswich, there's a man named Maha Sinathambi. For almost 26 years, that dude has been saying the same story over and over. And it's that Springfield will be the most future-facing city, etc., etc. God knows, everybody knows the speech off by heart. And just like media does, if I keep saying the same thing to you, you'll start believing, you'll start telling other people. And he is relentless at bringing big companies to Springfield. He's got GE, Marta, and the list goes on. He just did it because he is an intense entrepreneur.
How are we going to attract businesses? I don't know, I think it's interesting to go. I started one company 10 years ago and it was just called Starting a Business, and now it's a startup. And nobody helped me back then, and kind of, I guess, going, I can try and get help now. But I think there is a bit of a difference in culture in terms of expectations, and how do we actually build the culture of entrepreneurship is kind of this big sexy word at the moment, makes you sound better than someone who's just starting up a small business, because a lot of people, who are just putting their hand up and saying, I'm going to try this thing, aren't being supported in the same way because they're not so sexy or they're not so scalable. And I think you're right with saying that small businesses are actually the key to successful town centres. One of the most beautiful things about Melbourne is the percentage of independents that are still integrated into all the main streets and into the city centre itself. Something that Sydney lost, 20 years ago and struggles to try and find space for now because it's just so competitive in terms of price. So the types of things I'd be saying to you guys, with your proximity to Brisbane, that you have is affordability. You can be starting to think about some of the failures that that newly developing areas have not been able to deal with, which is about activating the ground floor authentically, not just with cafes, but actually with a range of businesses at different levels along their process. So there will be some businesses that want the cheapest land on the edge of the main street, and there's going to be others that want to move into the centre, and that you need to be able to facilitate that movement and growth of businesses within your environments. The flexibility of ground floors is something that I think designers really struggle with. And what I mean that is that, you know, you can start off with 20 square metres and then get the place next door and move to 40 square metres, and then maybe you do really well and get to 100 square metres. That you can change from housing to retail to hospitality to commercial. Again, I don't think that we're building this kind of flexibility into our cities. So when you're starting to do your planning laws, you need to be really rigorous and much tougher, I think, in terms of prescribing this kind of infrastructure. Again, Melbourne was built in load-bearing with, you know, buildings so you can pop out everything outside. We're building kind of these structures that are very hard to adapt. Concrete doesn't change very easily. So if you know, where it used to be garages and rubbish bins is now cafes because the buildings themselves allowed for that flexibility. So if you're future-proofing your town and you want to invite business in, then you have to allow them to kind of some space to kind of make their own environments in a way that is super flexible.
That was great. I don't know what I'm going to say now. There's a combination of, the thing is there's no one simple answer, and so I think most of the people in the room would all have individual really good ideas to contribute to that. Some of the things that we did in Adelaide is really look at the council rules and regulations and really ask ourselves which ones were fundamentally necessary. You know, I've given the outdoor dining one as an example already. You know, I imagine there's a lot of first and second story vacant buildings through the city, and that would have a lot to do with how the council enforces its building code and those sorts of regulations. Now, I'm not asking the council to break the rules, but maybe they could sort of encourage a culture of helping young entrepreneurs come up with creative solutions, rather than just sort of saying the computer says no. And I guess the story I didn't tell from the City of Adelaide is that, you know, it's not the elected members that do the work, it's the administration. Morale went up 4 years in a row, people achieve great things when motivated. And as someone who loves observing cities and had a really good view of one for a few years, I still profess not to understand how it all worked, and I don't think any one single person does. But what we did see is a really significant change in the community as a result of the change in the corporation. An organisation that delegated, empowered the staff. I know there's staff right here now go, yes, yes, yes. Empower the staff because they get out of bed in the morning, they want to do good things. Empower them to be able to say yes to a community member, and that community member then can go away and say, the council said yes for a change. And they said yes straight away. And, you know, I didn't, you know, the placemaking that went down in Adelaide, which was kind of famous, I reckon, yeah, I didn't know what was going to happen, but everyone said I did it, which is kind of really weird. But it was about the ecosystem that was created in a sense that the community had believed in the council empowered the community, and the elected members motivated and inspired the staff. And so I think, you know, just things like that, you know, look at the policies, you know, ask yourself, do we really need to do it that way? I think is a really big part of that. The other challenges, some really crazy examples again of where regulations, like right now, you know, it's illegal to have a legal firm without lawyers, but a chatbot AI can give a legal definition to an accuracy of 90% versus in 10 seconds versus a human who can do it in 70. And so, and you know, the share economy stuff, Airbnb, is kind of being debated as to whether we're going to allow it or not, rather than whether we should let these things flourish. And what are the contemporary industries coming forward that right now the rules say we can't do? And, you know, that digital stuff is the micro, it is the small businesses, it is the, you're right, it is trendy to be an entrepreneur. By the way, all startup businesses, I'm 1.8 people in my organisation, and, you know, Kylie's grown hers to a national, international organisation. And so it's just all the barriers that come with that. And it's not like you want a leg up, you just don't want people saying you can't do this stuff.
So, who wants to ask a question? You've got them, grab them. We're trying to move from challenge and thinking into action so we can have actions by the end of the day. What do you need to know from this amazing panel who've travelled the world? Emma's got a microphone here.
Hi, I'd just like to say that I'm really representing ideas of a number of other people in the community talking about entertainment. We're talking about free entertainment, we're talking about busking, we're talking about doing performances, musical performances in public. And one of the issues that comes up is things like professional indemnity insurance, public liability insurance. In case when you're performing in public, somebody trips over your piece of equipment and hurts themselves. And things like, do we have to have a permit to be able to busk in public, in a public space? Do we have to find out when the space is available and book it in advance? Things like that create a barrier to having pop-up performances. I'd be interested in your comments. I don't know what the council's views are on this. I don't know what the regulations are, and I think that probably a lot of buskers don't either. So that's about it.
So has anyone on the panel seen what councils have done to overcome this, to actually create a habit?
I think this is a real challenge, and it's not just obviously for musicians, but for anyone who's using the public realm in a way that isn't, completely passive. So what we're seeing is a lot of councils sort of struggling between the passive enjoyment of public space, to the extent almost that, where you see people have taken out seats and things like that because they actually don't want people spending time there at all because it's loitering or it's sleeping or whatever. So. And then you've got it through to the commercialisation of public spaces, where you're seeing public spaces being owned by entities. So a lot of developments are now delivering public realm, and then that inhibits a whole lot of things that are happening. So some of the most famous ones is obviously when it was happening in New York with Occupy Wall Street, where many of the spaces people didn't understand were private, and so they weren't allowed to actually spend time there doing things that the entity didn't want. So councils have got this real tension between kind of everybody should be open to use public realm in the way that best reflects that community and culture, through to, if you do that, then what's to stop people coming up and putting signage up or selling things or whatever. And I think the more populous your community becomes, the more tension there is about the use of public realm. It's a debate that's happening globally at the moment, like sort of in the UN habitat of saying how much of this privatisation. So to a certain extent, a busker trying to get money is a commercial use of public realm. And so I guess as a community, you need to decide how do you want to manage that. And it is a management sort of approach, but there's not an easy answer. It is actually something that you'll have to work out together.
Once again, great comments. All I'd sort of add is that this is where council needs to sort of say, how can we help our community add value and work through a process that's going to, make it easy for people. And obviously online is not for everyone, and I get that, but increasingly that is going to be the way the world works. And having that user interface that helps guide people through that process, I think ultimately, and once you've done it, you're empowered to do it again and again. And that's a good example. I gave the outdoor dining one with tables and chairs, and I think there's a lot of examples. And I'm not having a go at this council. It's not this. I don't know what this council's policies are, but there are councils all over Australia. The reason Melbourne's got more outdoor dining than Sydney is because Melbourne's outdoor dining fees are about a quarter that of Sydney's outdoor dining fees. It's sometimes as simple as that. But everything has unintended consequences, and Kylie sort of expressed those before about the privatisation of public space.
Hi, my name is Legge. I just have to say, I've not set foot at Centrelink. I raised my children as a single mom. I put every single dollars to put aside and open my restaurant. I call it Castories proudly. Some time ago when the town square was being built, there was a lot of dust, road closure. I remember crying, throwing 20 kilos of chicken because I could not sell my food. My street is totally closed from the public. There is not even a single compensation from the council. I'm shivering because I'm hurtful. And finally, my daughter told me, Mom, what are you going to do? I said, I really don't know what to do, darling. She said, I'll give up my job working at Zarafas in Hope Island. We will start a cafe during the daytime. I said, but that needs money. She said, why don't you take a loan from the house and see what we can do? I went and took a $75,000 loan on my home, did my place up, and then they decided to put the car park after a lot of thoughts. Again, dust. So every time I put a coffee out, the dust was on the coffee. People will just walk away. I'll say, I'm sorry, sir. Please, sir. I can count how many times I have begged and said sorry. Finally, when I wanted to put some table, the council said that I have to pay an outdoor dining fee.
Yes.
I did not ask for help. I dislike the fact that when I work hard, there is no help from the council. I have been pushed and pushed and pushed. I don't come to work with a happy heart anymore. I swear, I've had a lot of tears. So please, if all of you are listening to my voice, this is the same voice you will be hearing in all the businesses. We are very unhappy. We want the council to help us to progress. We are willing to do the hard work. Even if I come to the restaurant at 3 o'clock and make it work, I'm a worker. I don't want any one of you to give me 5 cents and say, here's $1. I do cleaning in the morning just to bring that extra money so I can pay the council, regardless I make a sale or not. So please, don't just sit there and think of what we can take. Think of what we can give back to these poor people who are literally working hard, working our gut out. Thank you, that's all.
Can I just say thank you for sharing that? That's a really hard thing to do. You've probably moved several people to tears, so I'm quite moved myself. So I'm not sure what to do with that for the panel, except I think we probably have to hear that and think about how we can support and congratulate this wonderful participant for speaking up, but think about what we can do when we get to projects. Unless any of you have another want to add a comment. Are there any other questions people might have of the group?
I'm just, maybe I'm not asking a question, maybe looking for support to the thought, or from tips from maybe Kylie as a placemaker. Businesses like this that are kind of become isolated, is there a way to give segue so that they're not so on their own? And I think that's probably one of the biggest problems that I see in Beenleigh, is that we do have everything. Someone mentioned there's no big playground or anything. There is. It's one of the hugest playgrounds I've ever seen, up in Duck Park, as we call it. One of the biggest skate parks, BMX, there's something for everyone here, but it is a little bit disjointed. So I wonder if you've found that in your travels. I know when I go to places like Wellington, I love walking around because everything is just like neatly segued and never, it feels like a walkable city, even though it's as big or bigger than this, or Toronto, or wherever you've been. You don't feel like there's big dead zones, and that's when it stops you from feeling like it's a walkable city. And I think that's what's happened with Veneta. It's suddenly become, there's her and then there's dead zones everywhere, and so people are less attracted to it. So what are your suggestions if it's not actually building, putting, I don't know how to say it, I've said it before, every great city I think has some sort of glitter strip, you can go from here to here to here to here to here. If you don't have that as an opportunity, how would you keep people moving in that direction and past? How do you get the foot traffic there?
So what we've sort of seen over the last 10 years since the GFC, or whatever it is that you want to call it, is like a really massive shift in retail. At the same time, there's been a huge pressure on cities to develop. So you are seeing kind of like the jagged teeth street, sort of like, where you might have 3 businesses that are closed and then one business that is really still holding on. I have a lot of empathy for small business owners. I am a small business owner, and yeah, I work 7 days a week, and there's days when I feel exactly like you, and yes, it really did, actually, it was very poignant because I know how exhausting it is to work that hard. As small business owners, you guys are, and the people who are here in the room, are your best support. One of the things that malls do extraordinarily well by having a central management is being able to kind of ensure that the traders work together, whether or not sometimes they want to or not. But as small business owners, we used to have the Chamber of Commerce, and that kind of, though, doesn't really help with that day-to-day of supporting each other. Some of the most innovative things I've seen from small businesses in America, there's sort of a small towns group, I think it's called, where they do shared procurement. So if you have to buy a product, they will band together and actually do a deal with the supplier so that the truck is coming once and they're getting better prices from it. It's about pushing for actually local council to procure locally, or at least a percentage. So in Manchester, I think some large percent, maybe 25% of all contracts from council have to be procured with local businesses. Marketing attempts, cross-marketing. I don't know why small business doesn't do it, but it is the best thing. On my street, on Oxford Street in Sydney, there is a cinema, a bookshop, and an arts hotel, a hotel like for staying over that is focusing on arts. And these guys will not share each other's databases with each other. And every time they come to me and they go, Kylie, we have to put another pedestrian crossing, we have to change the road. And I'm like, no, you three have got the perfect database that is for co-branding, and you just will not help each other. So talk to each other, use this room to say, here's the problem that I have, how do we connect up? And it works between businesses and between locations. So if you know your customers like the park, then say, why don't you take food away today and go up to the park and have a picnic? Or, you know what I mean? So you can actually build that connectivity in your locations. It's a big challenge with a very short amount of time to answer. Sorry.
Great question. I'll cite sort of 3 inspirations for me of cities that have responded to this. Firstly, Renew Newcastle was a project where a bunch of young people got together and identified all the empty buildings, went and talked to the owners and started the conversation around how to activate those. And so it is about, the term is about sort of, the jagged, edge, blank, blank, full, blank, blank. And so how do you connect that? Second one would be the Melbourne laneways, which is just kind of like, urbanism 101. But the key to that, which Adelaide replicated and did better than Melbourne, maybe, anyway, was understanding where people move and why they move. And so I really think what you're saying, by the way, is an absolutely key issue for this precinct. And that is the train station is an anchor tenant. People are going to walk from the train station to somewhere. How do you guide them on that journey with that full inventory of experiences that give them an experience? And once again, car parking isn't evil. One day it'll be irrelevant, but it's not evil. But also, put the car parks potentially on the outside of the precinct so that people have to park and then walk into the city. One of the things Adelaide did really badly, we've got more car parks per capita than pretty much any city in the world. Go figure, some the pariah or whatever. But we put them in the middle of the city, so the cars have to drive into the middle and then drive out of the middle. So at 5 o'clock, when you're having a dining experience in Rundle Street, you're sitting next to a traffic jam. Third example that I found as an inspiration is Christchurch. They had a great program. They had an epic earthquake. I think it's equivalent of something like 20 or 30 atomic bombs. 80% of the CBD has been demolished. But what they did is a whole pile of temporary infrastructure. It's kind of like, placemaking for, the ultimate placemaking mecca. And they did gap fillers, and those gap fillers, okay, what's an empty piece of land, etc., what could you put in that to stimulate and activate? So, there are so many opportunities to do things, cheaply and activate entrepreneurs in that sense would be, and just the only other comment I'd say is I just wish you all power, because it's really hard, and I feel the pain, and I don't want to not acknowledge what you said, and I guess hopefully this is why people are here. And you've identified where your business is. Fortunately, I'm not going to be here this afternoon, but I'm sure there's at least a handful of these people in this room that are going to go and have a great Indian meal over the next week or month. So please support local businesses.